funny thing is, a couple of days ago, Steve Witkoff felt that the position between the United States and Russia was narrowing, so that whatever they're going to agree with was getting closer. But when he talked about the European side and when he talked about Ukraine side, he merely said, we're talking about our position. So there's a big gap between even Kiev and the European Union. And that gap was really highlighted by Keir Starmer when he's talking about his coalition of the willing.
This morning I convened the largest, strongest group of countries yet behind a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening the restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table. Our militaries will meet on Thursday this week here in the United Kingdom to put strong and robust plans in place to swing in behind a peace deal and guarantee Ukraine's future security.
Doug, if that was like the third or fourth month of the war, you might say, okay, we'll see how that plays out. But this is the fourth year of the war here, and all the things that he's talking about there have already been tried and abysmally failed. Just on the surface, and forget about the connections for the moment, but just on the surface of the Europeans coming up with this so-called robust coalition of the willing, what the hell?
All of the European globalist elites are stuck with this situation. For them to back down and say, look, we were wrong. We started this war on the basis of a whole range of false assumptions. The assumptions have backfired. We are now in terrible condition. It's time for us to shed our burdens overseas, focus like a laser on our own economies, rebuild what's left of them. That's something they cannot do. If they do that, that's an admission of abysmal failure. And we know people don't do that. And so the Titanic, which they are riding, is on its way to the bottom. They're no longer on the surface. They're all standing on the bridge, headed down. And it's only a matter of time until it hits the bottom and crashes. The problem is the populations of Europe will pay the price for this in a big way. That's already begun in Germany, and it's going to continue elsewhere. I think you're going to see a real upheaval in Europe on a scale of, say, 1848 and 1789. There's going to be a tremendous change coming in Europe, and much of it will not be attractive. Some of it will be quite ugly, but it has to happen because the elites have betrayed the interests of their own people on a grand scale. Even in Great Britain, where people have said for a long time, oh, that will never happen here, we're beginning to see a lot of evidence for it. So I don't want to be dismissive and say that Starmer doesn't matter, but he doesn't. He's dead man walking. Secondly, if any of these people try to put together a military organization and drive it into Western Ukraine, they're going to have to go through Germany and Poland. That means that they'll need rail lines and they'll need the support of those countries. I'm not sure the Germans will be all that terribly excited about supporting what the British and the French want to do in Western Ukraine, lest their cities, their infrastructure suddenly come under bombardment. And I think the same thing is true in Poland. Tusk has already said, if you're going to go in there, don't look to us to join you. So this is a sort of Don Quixote tilting a windmill. This is not going to happen. It can't happen without us, and we're not going to be part of it, which means it can't happen.
So let me ask you this. One of the other things from just out from the news today is actually Ursula von der Leyen has said, they want to be the Europeans, or they want to be ready for war by 2030. They're on this Rearm Europe binge right now, where they're going to allegedly add $800 billion over the next 5 years, and they want to have this combat ready force. Now, to what extent do you think this signals to the Russians that they also need to be ready for a continent-wide war? Or do you think that they're just dismissive of it and they think that it's not real? What impact does this have on Russia? Because no one in the West seems to want to pay attention to the other half of this equation to get the war over, other than the dismissive stuff like H.R. McMaster at the beginning here.
Well, the Russians are nothing if not prudent. So I'm sure the Russian National Security Council will sit down with the prime minister and then eventually meet with President Putin, the defense minister, and they will have a plan to hedge against the possibility that such a thing could happen in Western Europe. But the probability that you're going to get the unity of effort under a unified military command structure that all of that demands is very low. And that's been the problem in Europe since the end of the Second World War. We have provided that command structure. We've provided the unity of effort in the sense that they would join us if we did something. Well, they've grown tired of it because they've been burned as a result. Burned in the Balkans, burned in Afghanistan, burned in Saudi Arabia, Libya, burned in Iraq. I don't think they're very anxious to do that anymore. So now we have them talking about doing things on their own. Well, that's going to take a lot longer than 10 years. There's much more involved than simply spending on defense. So I just have difficulty taking all this too seriously. But the Russians, of course, as I said, will take prudent measures. But they're not especially worried. They've demonstrated their military prowess in Ukraine. They have otherwise secure borders. Eurasia is silent. It's quiet. Central Asia is under control. Things are developing positively there. So I don't think either Russia or China are particularly impressed with this.
And so, what do you believe is going to happen with the European movement in this action right now? Because you have Turkey doesn't seem to be very excited about even the possibility of fighting with Russia. Certainly, Hungary and Slovakia are not. Romania, who's even going to be running there? I mean, they've got their own internal domestic crisis right now to try to figure out, are they even democratic anymore? And then some of these other, you mentioned Poland, for different reasons. There seems to be no unity in Europe at all, other than it seems to be Keir Starmer and Macron for the moment are trying to rally support. But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of prospect that that's actually even going to happen.
Well, the Russian foreign minister, Gorshakov, in the 19th century, penned a memorandum. It was approved by Tsar Alexander II, and it was sent to Bismarck and other crown heads in Europe. And he used this phrase, the concert of Europe, the concert of Europe. That's sort of like the rules-based order, the liberal international order. Well, he said the concert of Europe. Bismarck took this thing, drew a circle around it, an arrow up into the margins, and then sent it to the King of Prussia, new Emperor of Germany, and said, "What the hell is this? What's the concert of Europe?" Well, that was a legitimate question. What is the EU? I think it's a loose collection of states, most of whom do not want to be ruled by Brussels, all of whom want to be sovereign and are tired of being bullied and pushed around and adhering to regulations that are antithetical to their interests, especially if you're an Italian, a Spaniard, a Frenchman. I think this is all nonsense. NATO is D.O.A, dead on arrival. It's going nowhere fast. Why? Because it's proven to be entirely ineffective. You know, we didn't fight a real war from our standpoint. We fought a proxy war. We used other people's troops. But that was a NATO war led by us. It failed miserably. So I think what you're going to see in the future in Europe are various blocks of countries that build their own security arrangements, their own security zones. You'll have the Scandinavians, perhaps the Baltic states, Germany. You may have the Netherlands. It's hard to tell. The Norwegians may want something different from the rest of Scandinavia because they're more comfortable being close to us and the British, along with Iceland and Canada. Who knows? And if you live in Southern Europe, I mean, all the time that I was in uniform and I served at high levels in NATO, the French, the Spaniards, the Italians, and to a lesser extent the Greeks would all point to North Africa and the Middle East and say, that's where the problem is. It's not in Russia. Why do we continue to obsess over Russia? The Russians aren't coming, you know? You've seen that crazy movie that came out in the 60s. Yeah. The Russians are coming, the Russians are coming, they're not coming, all right? That's what the Washington elite doesn't want to admit. That world doesn't exist anymore. We got to get out of it. And all the sane people in most of the world, in Northeast Asia, in Europe, I think, in much of Africa and Latin America, all understand the irrationality of waging high-end conventional conflict against each other. I don't think they have a problem figuring out that is antithetical to their interests. The problem is here with us, and this obsession with power that you can project to use, impose, and bully your opponents. This has got to stop. Yeah. And when it stops, there will be no massive invasion of the United States or North America by Chinese or Russians. Forget it. They're not coming.